again and asked the others if they should leave. They all agreed, but were suddenly startled by a red shadow that appeared near them. The shadow, like an illusion, began to murmur that they had passed the test. Not knowing how to react, the group watched the shadow condense into a circle of intense internal energy. This circle molded itself into a red light and finally transformed into a woman who offered them an opportunity to make a contract with the 10,000-eyed observer. Meanwhile, outside the tower, the teacher was waiting anxiously. Her look showed all her concern as she held the ID. Suddenly, a large teleportation portal formed in front of the tower, and when the dust settled, she saw her students, with the protagonist in front. Yumina ran to them, asking repeatedly if they were okay. The protagonist reassured her, saying that everyone was fine. The teacher confessed her concern, explaining that they hadn't left even after the evacuation notice. Faced with her question, the protagonist asked to go somewhere more secluded before explaining. Speaking on behalf of the group, he said that they were caught in an irregularity after the transition to room 4, but admitted that it was difficult to put into words everything that had happened. Yumina then revealed what she knew. She said that the irregularity was caused by an external intruder who had finished off a student. She explained that these intruders are dimensional pirates who hunt new students to steal their IDs, which prevents resurrection and traps them in the tower forever. Regarding the invaders' fate, she revealed that they managed to escape. The white-haired girl, Dako Yan, intervened, questioning if these events didn't seem like a test. She argued that if intruders could invade the essence of the academy, the tower, and nothing could be done, then the institution couldn't claim to be the best in the multiverse. The teacher, Yumina, disagreed, explaining the harsh reality. The academy protects the students, but inside the tower, they are on their own. If the tower chooses the invaders instead of the students, the academy cannot interfere. That was the will of the tower, and should be respected. Exalted, Dako repeated the teacher's words with disdain. Grabbing her ID, she stated that she didn't like that situation at all, and preferred to teleport than to continue the conversation. And so she did, disappearing in front of a helpless Yumina. Seeing what happened, the protagonist intervened. He asked the teacher to understand Dako's reaction, as something very bad had happened in there. Intrigued, Yumina asked him to tell her exactly what it was. He thought for a moment, looking for the best way to explain that, before they returned, they had an encounter that made Slight and Ruchel visibly uncomfortable, and that he himself didn't know how to express in words. Banyun Wan revealed to the teacher that they had met the Constellation. It was known that the Constellation was made up of transcendental patrons or observers who were attentive to various dimensions. When they found someone who interested them, they formed a contract with those people. They were transcendental beings who exerted influence in this dimension. They could offer powerful magic, as well as special abilities and powerful artifacts. However, they demanded a lot in return, but until then, no one refused. Everyone knew that, in a world where power is valuable, there was nothing sweeter than their tempting offers. The Constellations would be attractive partners, which is why the teacher couldn't believe that the observers were in the same world as them. The protagonist revealed that the thousand-eyed observer had spoken. He also said that this observer had a strange voice and promised power in exchange for the fulfillment of his demands. The teacher, not really knowing the real story, found everything very incredible, with a radiant expression as she spoke. Even with the teacher so excited, the pink-haired girl, as well as Slight, were not excited at all. After the protagonist asked the teacher if that was really incredible, and she confirmed it, he asked a difficult and sudden question, but he wanted to know what the Academy's position was on this. At first, the teacher was surprised by the student's question, but stated that the Academy officially valued neutrality. When she said that, deep down, they encouraged the contracts, the protagonist understood that point. Hearing all this internally, the protagonist couldn't believe that a place like the Academy had no defense at all. Returning to reality with the teacher's insistent questions, who wanted to know what the observer's request had been. That question made Banyun Wan even more tense, and he revealed that the request was an elimination. The teacher was shocked by what the protagonist had said. She was confused and wanted him to be clearer in his answer. It was then that he revealed the full story. The observer had promised to contract 2 of them if they agreed to eliminate the other 2. So, that was the reason the group was so annoyed. He told them that back in the tower, the Constellation's strange voice had talked to them, making a weird proposal and swearing loyal love. The man reached out to the 4 of them, waiting for one of them to move first and quickly fulfill his request. Our main character remembered grinding his teeth at all that nonsense talk. He wasn't going to join, and he hoped Dako wouldn't either. Looking to the side, our protagonist noticed his friend was building up energy. The girl's deep eyes were shaking from the amount of power she was exuding. He told Yumina that Doko was asking them to leave her alone, but the professor got sad. She understood that the young woman had released her energy to force the constellation to leave. After he finished telling the story, the professor asked if that meant they couldn't enter the tower. Our main character was counting on the tower for his duel against Erector, and not being able to use it was super inconvenient. He thought he'd just have to train with the time he had left. He called the professor and said he was thinking of sending what happened in the tower as a report, along with the recording he had made. She said that was fine, but if possible, she'd like to hear more about it while they had a meal. But when he looked at the girl, he knew that wouldn't be possible, not after everything that had happened. The protagonist explained. Both of them were visibly exhausted, physically and mentally. She was devastated when she understood how her students felt. In the end, the professor praised the three of them for a job well done. Our main character was so grateful for her consideration. She promised to do everything she could so this situation wouldn't happen again, hoping none of them would think badly of the academy. With that, she told everyone to get some good rest. Slight said goodbye to the two of them as he and Ruchel left, using teleportation. Meanwhile, our main character asked them to give Dako his regards. He was about to leave too, but the professor asked him to wait for a moment. She said she had a question to ask and warned him she was going to be direct. Then, worried, she asked why the observer hadn't just promised contracts to two of the four of them, but instead had selected him and Doko Yeon. The professor's question shocked our protagonist, but in the end, he confirmed her question. Deep down, he knew the observer wasn't just trying to pit them against each other. He seemed to want to sift something from the sand, and the observer pointed to them, claiming they could definitely reach the top together, but only if they got rid of the dead weight. When they saw this, both the blue-eyed blondie and the pink-haired girl were devastated. That being, who had appeared out of nowhere and had seemed like an enemy before, was now trying to make their two friends fight. Our protagonist and the white-haired young woman were surprised by the proposal. The being was promising that, as long as they eliminated the other two, all climbers would get more treasure radiant, and that they should take advantage of it, because that was just how the world was. After telling her everything and recalling things with Professor Yumina, he went back to his dorm, finding her sitting in a fetal position. He looked at his companion, wondering if Slight hadn't even bothered to shower. Our protagonist approached Slight, trying to break the ice, saying that the way he was sitting was impressive. Pina, he turned to go to the bathroom while his companion tried to say something. Slight asked if he was trying to humiliate him. Rolling his eyes, the protagonist was scared by the question, not knowing why his companion thought that. His companion apologized, saying he actually just wanted to vent a bit. He said the protagonist could insult him if he wanted, since he was nothing. All of this made the protagonist feel bad about being close to Slight. A few minutes later, for the first time since he entered that room, Slight lifted his head to look into the protagonist's eyes. He said he hated him, which left the protagonist not knowing how to react. Even though our protagonist also wanted to express his hatred, he had to settle for just thinking about it. So, he had to endure and wait, saying that he was naive, which could be useful. Despite everything, our protagonist decided to sit and listen to what his roommate had to say. It was then that he told Slight he could say anything he wanted. He wouldn't mind. However, Slight continued to sit there depressed, but decided to speak. He said he was important in his world too. He was one of the most talented, and from what the protagonist knew of Slight, he already expected him to be talented in his world. Slight's father had said he was exaggerating, as had his family and even his companions. They praised and commented on his talent, even giving him the sacred sword, entrusting him with unparalleled power. He said that thanks to everyone who trusted him, he was able to form a contract with the sacred sword. Bora asked why they were so worried about the protagonist, who still tried to tell Slight that he was talented. He didn't need to take the words of that ridiculous entity into consideration. While listening to what the protagonist was saying, Slight's eyes widened, since for him, the situation was different. So, Slight used the protagonist's words against him, claiming it was easy to ignore the entity, since he had been chosen. Light, deeply offended, continued his complaints. To begin with, they were divine beings. They were transcendental beings, much stronger and more recognized than humans. He couldn't believe the protagonist, Doko, could refuse so easily. Upon hearing that, the protagonist was surprised by the question. He understood more or less what Slight was trying to imply, and then lowered his head, stating he had rejected it because that kind of proposal was pointless. He also explained that there were many ways to stand out. Light, however, claimed he was only saying that because he had overwhelming talent. And he, to be honest, said that if he were able to receive a choice from a divine being, he would even hesitate, but with some reluctance. Our protagonist couldn't believe he was hearing Slight say that he wouldn't reject it so easily. He said he might have even made that choice, but the fact was he felt resentful and scared. Faced with that scary revelation, our protagonist couldn't say anything. After his shower, he sighed several times while drying his hair. He looked around and realized that now calmer, Slight had gone to bed. Feeling that he was calmer, our protagonist looked at him for for a moment. He even thought he was asleep and decided to leave, but at that moment the young man called him. Light, now with a guilty expression on his face, apologized to our protagonist for crying like that. He also said that what had happened wasn't just his fault, and so he apologized for acting that way. Since his friend was calmer and apologized